Good morning, good afternoon. My name is Jens Hoffmann, and I am the editor of The Exhibitionist, which is a magazine dedicated to exhibition making and curating. And we are here to launch our second issue that just arrived fresh from the press yesterday. And I have here with me Chus Martínez, who is the chief curator of the Museum of Contemporary Art in Barcelona and also one of the co-curators of the forthcoming Sao Paulo Biennial. And Chus is also one of the members of the editorial advisory board of The Exhibitionist. And we wanted to take this opportunity to talk a little bit about curating and writing about curating, publishing activities around the curatorial practice, something that has been coming up quite a lot over the last couple of years. Many books have been published on the subject of curating. There's a few new series in the works about the history of curating, which has become a very important topic. And I think lots of these publication activities in regards to curatorial practice also have a lot to do with the large network of educational programs for curating. So perhaps I should start with Chus and ask you how you feel about our idea to actually begin making a new magazine that's solely dedicated to a curatorial practice. I've actually had a bit of criticism, particularly from the side of curators, no, not from you anyway, all the time, but from many other curators that felt like now that there is a magazine that is about curating, curators begin to overshadow artists even more. How would you respond to such criticism?
Well, I don't think so. I think my first criticism was when I received the invitation. Again, one of these forums where curators meet each other, so to say, and then again we talk only about the practice of curating as if it's a science that we are taking for granted, so to say. But then if you read between the lines and then you discover somehow that it's a magazine dedicated to the history of exhibitions, seen from the point of view of those who has been curating them mostly, with a small section on historical exhibitions, then it kind of has another light to it. But it is, and it isn't problematic. I think it is problematic in the sense, every time that you would say, okay, it's only art critics that are going to write about art, then you need to define what an art critic is. So it's also not very clear today what a curator is, and so many artists would claim that they are also curators. But the problem, I think, is a challenge. It's not only a problem, and I think also that what is very important is the kind of writing that curators can or cannot produce.
Well, picking up on this, I should probably add that the magazine is written only by curators. All the contributions in the magazines are texts that curators have written. We have consciously made the decision that we didn't want to invite critics or artists or art historians to write for the magazines, but really practitioners, people who organize and curate exhibitions. And perhaps it's important to just maybe explain a little bit the structure of the magazine to sort of give you an idea. The magazine itself comes out twice a year and has a very strict format. It starts with a section that is called Curator's Favorite, and for each issue we invite 3 curators to write a text about their most favorite exhibition. And Chus made a contribution to that section that maybe we can talk about in a second in the first issue. The second part of the magazine is called Back in the Day, which is a text about one historically important exhibition, and we've, for the first 2 issues, tried to look into exhibitions that we felt were important but maybe overlooked. The third part of the magazine is called Assessments, for which we invite 4 curators to write a 1,500-word text about an exhibition that recently took place and to review that exhibition, but from a curatorial point of view. For the first issue, we looked at the Istanbul Biennial, and for the second issue, we looked at the Pictures Generation show at the Metropolitan Museum in New York. The 5th part of the magazine is called Typologies, and for Typologies, we will, over the next couple of issues, specifically look at different types of exhibitions. So for the first issue, we looked into the solo exhibition, and for the second issue, we looked into discussing art in public space. The next part of the magazine is called Attitudes, where we have one writer from the editorial board write an essay that is more an opinion piece. And then the final part of the magazine, which I'm very excited about, is called Rear Mirror, where we invite 2 curators to write an essay about an exhibition that they've recently curated, but looking back at their experiences of how the exhibition came together, about how successful they maybe were with implementing the ideas they had about the exhibition, all kind of like looking back after the exhibition has opened. I should probably say, and that maybe brings us back to our discussion, is that the Exhibitionist is only available as a printed magazine. It's not available online. And it's really solely focusing on exhibitions with artwork. And I think that was really something that was very important to me, that I wanted to discuss exhibition making. We were just talking about all these definitions that curating has at this point, and who is a curator and who's not a curator. And it was really important for me not to make a magazine about curating in general, but specifically look into making exhibitions. I have a very uneasy time thinking about curators or curating conferences or curating books or curating, curating without art is not necessarily something that I'm so interested in, and I think that our magazine is sort of like really presenting itself and establishing itself as a voice really for exhibition making, curating with artwork. So kind of trying to be a bit in opposition to some of the latest trend in curating that really either curate an exhibition without art or work with artists without doing an exhibition.
Well,
yeah, that was
a very good introduction. I think that it's very important that just what you said, but it's also to study in how far the magazine can become really a source of research and not only a source of presentation, and to talking about things that you have done, for example, but kind of try to figure out how we can use exhibition making as another kind of writing for art history and another kind of writing for art reception, so to say, an understanding of how things come together in a practice, and how things come together means not only the works, but the reception of the works, the written text, and the non-written text, the memory, how an art exhibition also contributes to create a memory of art practice. And also this question of where to look back is very interesting, because, for example, we are producing a series of seminars at MACBA about the history of exhibition. And when we started to do that, the exhibitions that we know, we meaning even our team, are mostly exhibitions from the Anglo-Saxon context. I think from the States, from England, from Europe, and so on. It's very difficult to access material or even know about very interesting projects that happen in Latin America, and there is many and plenty, but even more difficult about Asia or even the Middle East, and they also happen. So it's very interesting now, for example, that I am studying with a couple of other people all the exhibitions that were made before the Museum of Contemporary Art of Tehran opened just some months before the Iranian Revolution in '79. So in between '76 and '79, a series of exhibitions took place in Tehran that they really mark a turning point of the understanding of art in that context. And it also made a really big impact, because all of these artists actually went into exile, mostly to LA and to France, and it kind of disappeared for a very long while. So it's very interesting to study how do they make exhibitions, who was the public and the audience for these exhibitions, and who wrote or not. And which kind of writing are you going to apply if you are talking about an exhibition made in Venezuela by Jacobo Borges in '66, or an exhibition made in the '90s or in the '80s. So all these issues about research and kind of incorporating them into the curatorial, and stop talking about the curatorial only about a practice of selecting. I think that this is really important.
To stop talking about it as a practice of selecting and as a practice of perhaps knowledge production in the way of producing essays, but as well as exhibitions.
But you're going to be the curator of the next Istanbul Biennial, so how can you incorporate, for example, this kind of practice as the editor of a magazine that is interested in exhibition making, and then being the curator of a biennial, which is about selecting, of course, but also has a history in a context which is or in between Europe and non-Europe? which is very important now, for example, with the economical crisis. How are you going to incorporate the history of the Biennial of Istanbul into the, can that be made? Is that important to be made?
Yeah, I think it's very important. I mean, if you start working on a biennial, you begin a conversation with many different conversations partners. And one of the conversation partners are all of the previous Istanbul biennials and all the other biennials that exist around the same time as we are doing our biennial. So I think, you know, just to maybe go quickly to answer your question about Istanbul, it's really like me looking at the history of the Istanbul biennial for the last 25 years and beginning to see, okay, what are maybe elements that come up in each of those exhibitions again and again. So one of the things that we have decided to do for Istanbul, which is related to the Exhibitionist, is a conference that will take place in October, which is called Remembering Istanbul, for which we have invited all the curators of the previous Istanbul biennials and local art critics, art historians, and artists who will function as respondents. I'm really curious to know also not only what the curators have done and how their experiences were with putting together the Istanbul Biennial, but also to see how has the audience over the last 25 years seen the development of the Istanbul Biennial, which you know, started 25 years ago more as an arts festival with many, many different curators that, you know, and even still with countries doing their own thing, similar like as in Venice, to, you know, becoming this biennial that is very much curated by you know, a single curator or a small group of curators as one entity. So that's a way of sort of like trying to incorporate some of the thoughts that maybe come out of the Exhibitionist into making a big biennial.
But is that going to be reflected in some way in the exhibition or in the catalog, do you think?
Well, I hope that the results of what Adriano Petrosa, my co-curator, and I will find in the conference will, you know, help us to figure out how to actually make the exhibition itself. I want to find something that sort of like consistently goes to all of those biennials and maybe reflect upon this and have our exhibition almost be either the next step or reflection of that continuum that you find. And if you think about Istanbul, I feel like, you know, many of the recent Istanbul biennials have very much examined the relationship between arts and social practice, art and politics, and I think this is something that, you know, we will further explore.
No, because I think that one of the issues also, like I remember a conversation I had not very long ago with Katrin Romberg, which is the curator of the current Berlin Biennial, and we were talking about the catalog and how to conceive exhibition catalogs today, and she said that it was important to go back perhaps to the idea of a catalog as a catalog, like a catalog that would introduce like some of the issues that inform the exhibition and also some writing about the works that are present in the exhibition and go away from these catalogs that are actually more of a semi-theory manual kind of thing. But then back, for example, in a magazine like that you are invited curators, the curator is also in a very strange position. I think sometimes it's really just a practitioner and almost does not know even how to babble about what we are doing. And then some other times it's really a theoretician. So it's a really strange balance where we are moving. And it's also interesting what you are saying about the Istanbul Biennial, because we are in such a crisis that history and the history of exhibition making is also a way of rescuing our own history. And the fact that we are kind of preserving culture as a way of talking and addressing issues that otherwise cannot be addressed, funnily enough. And it's the same with the Istanbul Biennial. I think it almost, Istanbul, I mean Sao Paulo, it almost collapsed after the previous edition. And now, in a year, a group of curators, 6 of them, we have been trying to put together the next biennial so that it does not disappear as a cultural space. And one of the ways of doing so was actually to invest in an impressive study of not only the history of the Sao Paulo Biennial in itself, but also the history of exhibitions in the continent and how do they inform each other, who was exhibiting where, and how actually knowledge transfer from the different countries, and how knowledge that is created in a practice can get translated in theory. And that's really a challenge right now, I think.
No, definitely. I think that, you know, overall, all of those things that you were describing and I was speaking about before have totally, very much to do with a sort of form of self-reflexivity that goes on within curating, where, you know, while you're making a show, you're actually talking about how to make an exhibition itself. And I think out of that spirit, not only the magazine comes out, but a lot of exhibitions that we are seeing right now. That's, for example, this year, the Taipei Biennial that is curated by Tira Zolgador, that is going to invite all the artists that have been invited at the Taipei Biennial of Vasif Kortun, and Turkish curator. He's inviting exactly the same artists, but now 4 years later with new work, so that the audience sort of gets an idea of how the work of these particular artists has further developed. So there's a lot of self-reflexivity, conceptualization going on in exhibition making over the last decade, I would say, that also, I think to a certain degree fosters a sort of sophistication of the discourse around exhibition making. But sometimes I wonder, how do you think this is accessible to the audience? Is that interesting to a general audience? Is a magazine like The Exhibitionist interested to a general public, or is it just for really a specific group of people?
I don't think so. I think that is, or from my point of view, it's much more interesting to talk about exhibition making and the history of exhibitions, because it actually not only presents the works, but presents the different contexts and how, or in how far a work changes by the context that has been created every time, and how this context is not only defined by the curator, but it's also defined by the, you know, by the geopolitical and aesthetic conditions in which the exhibition took place. That's why, for example, this kind of repetition of inviting the same artist is not only a gesture or a choreography, but it has also to do with an investigation of how the very same context can make the very same artist look completely different, for example. But on top of it, and that's very important, is that during the late 90s, it was a big talk about talking about curators, which I think is very boring, and it's also kind of a contradiction because we are both curators. But it's very boring to talk about curating as a skill, as something that, and then all these curatorial programs and the academia, and then it was like interesting but absurd separation in between art history, programs dealing with curating, art writing, and philosophy of art, for example. So this kind of new turn into the history of exhibitions, it kind of puts things together in a much more organic way, because it really needs a reflection that involves art history, that involves philosophy, that involves like all these disciplines in a much more creative way than just the curator as somebody who is just in a power position, having certain skills and having just the possibility to select here and there, and to be visible where the artists get visible in a second moment, so to say. And in that far, I hope that this also influenced teaching. I think you are teaching in San Francisco, and I think that this is also very important for art history in itself, because it's impossible to go to an art history program and to get a line about the history of exhibitions. And it has been made there. I think the writing took place there. Or the non-writing. It's not only about the writing, it's also very important. I think if you would like to study Documenta 5, for example, there is so much non-written about it, or things that just got into the conversation. So it's now that you are talking to Jean-Christophe Amann and all these people, and then you all of a sudden realize there's almost nothing out there.
Well, it's also interesting that the exhibition is such a temporary medium, you know, and there's almost no way of having the experience of an exhibition recreated once it has passed. So I find it quite interesting to actually meet with curators or artists who have participated in those exhibitions to sort of like give different sort of first-hand accounts of how this happened. But I always found that a difficulty about exhibition making, that exhibitions would disappear. You would have the reviews left, you would have the catalog left behind, maybe archives, you know. But for many shows, there isn't even anything available anymore. I mean, we have like talked about some of the some exhibitions in the magazine where it was very, very hard to find any images of.
But also, when you go back to an exhibition, you are not performing memory in the same manner that you perform memory in art history, for example. I think memory gets not only performed by the fact that you remember the exhibition, but also by how the artists remember the taking part of this exhibition and the reception, which is not only the reviewing of the exhibition. I think many very badly reviewed shows remain today as key shows. So it's really not only the importance of the review or art criticism, but the fact that remembering an exhibition, as you say, is also like putting us in another way of performing memory. Like the task of, for example, interviewing the artists, revisiting the floor plans, which is stupid but important. So, for example, we have been trying to locate in '62, David Lamelas win the Sao Paulo Biennial. So there is a picture of that piece that was a structural piece. And it was very important to find out the floor plans to see where this piece was located, because the piece referred to the architecture, but all the remaining pictures was not revealing all this information. So it's very intriguing. It's a very productive exercise, so to say.
It's a very different experience, though, than seeing an exhibition for yourself. And walking into a gallery space, seeing the works by yourself rather than looking at the floor plan or some images. And in the end, I personally would always prefer the experience inside the gallery space than looking at floor plans and kind of becoming almost like an archaeologist of exhibitions.
Yeah, it's also very nice, like this kind of utopia that history is creating. Like sometimes there is like mythical exhibitions that nobody saw, and it became mythical. And even that kind of myth into the mind, it's interesting. I think it's an absurd, but it's also not an utopia. It has another role. It becomes a space in itself, into the imagination. So it helps us to perform something that you imagine it to be like that. For example, Experiencia 68, one of the key exhibitions of the Instituto Torcuato Di Tella in Buenos Aires. This exhibition provoked another exhibition called Tucumán Arde. The only remaining material of these exhibitions are the material, but then you kind of reenact these exhibitions in your mind, and then this become also very interesting fake space, if you want, fiction. But fiction is not bad. It's also not against the truth.
I think we were opening the podium and to see if there's any questions in the audience at this point. So please feel free to join us here in our conversation.
Thanks for the presentation. And I wanted to ask about the cover image, because we've been talking a little bit about selecting. And it's just, it's very interesting to choose Honer Catedral when you're speaking about the relationship between art and public space. Can you hear me at all?
No, not very well.
She's asking about the cover? And
the
then
Honer Catedral, the cover image.
Yeah.
And you talked a little bit about, if I understood correctly, the relationship, this new issue is about art and public space and the relationship between the two.
Yeah, this is this one here.
And could you talk about that and the selection of the cover image?
Yeah, the first cover image is obviously, we see here, this is the first one that we choose. This is part of artwork by Marcel Duchamp called Étant donné, which is this door. In the door there's two holes. Many of you know this piece, of course. You look through the two holes and you see a scene behind there where you see a woman exhibiting herself, dimly lit. And I choose this piece as an homage to Marcel Duchamp in a way, thinking about the idea of the exhibitionist, but also, us as curators being in one way or the other exhibitionists, because every exhibition that we do somehow exhibits our ideas, our concepts, our thoughts, our preferences, our tastes in art. And, the person who is going in front of this door and looks through these holes, for the rest of the audience in that space becomes, in some way or the other, an exhibitionist itself. So, the work itself sort of makes you part of it and exposes you all of a sudden. And the second cover here is sort of a continuation of that idea where you actually all of a sudden almost see that woman who is actually behind the door. This is a piece by Niki de Saint-Phal that was exhibited at the Moderna Musette, where the audience was actually able to walk inside that female body. So it was sort of a continuous idea of thinking about, how to exhibit ourselves, and the idea of the exhibitionist as someone who runs around almost naked, and of course metaphorically here, the ideas, thoughts, concepts of the curators within an exhibition. Yeah. Follow-up question then.
Please use the microphone.
Oh. Are those magazines available for purchase at the show?
You can come afterwards. We have plenty of copies here that we were happy to give you for free. Yeah.
Sorry, can I just come back to my question? Because I don't, maybe it wasn't clear, but if I understood correctly, the theme of this particular issue, number 2, is relationship between art and public space. Is there a relationship between the cover image and the theme?
There is no relationship, because the second issue is not really about art and public space. Only one section is about this.
Sorry.
So the cover image was actually chosen more in relationship to our ideas overall and the concept of the magazine.
And also, this was not art in public space.
Yeah, that was actually taking
this is
place
actually
in a museum.
inside the Moderna Museet. So it was like a collaborative project.
There's one part inside the magazine that's called typologies. And typologies, always for every issue, we look at a different type of exhibition. So the first one was the solo show, the next one was art and public space. So now I'm working on the third issue, figuring out what the type of exhibition will be that we're going to look at there. There's a question in the back. One thing I should maybe add also is that this magazine, in terms of the concept and the ideas and also the design, has been hugely inspired by Calle de Cinema, which was a magazine that came out in France, still existing, and began in the mid-50s, and was mostly revolving around film directors that are associated with New Wave cinema, Nouvelle Vague, with writers and film critics and filmmakers like Jean-Luc Godard, François Truffaut, and so on. So we adopted very much that style in terms of our design, but also this idea of the author that was written about by François Truffaut in one of the first issues is something that I feel personally very connected to, thinking about the curator as an author, as someone who's having a very specific idea that he or she follows through a number of exhibitions. So almost trying to create a very specific style of making exhibitions. And my goal was always to think about this idea of me maybe doing an exhibition and you coming and saying, oh, this is an exhibition curated by that curator, and you go and see another exhibition, to sort of like really refine exhibition making almost to the degree that it is sort of comparable to the authorship of a novel or a film.
Yes, Betty Lane from São Paulo. It's a question to Chus Martínez. I'd like to know, how was the process of working in team and trying to change the situation of the Biennial of São Paulo, and how did you achieve that?
Well, it's a very challenging situation in many levels, because, as you know, we got like only, I think, a short year to put that exhibition together, which is which is a risk, but it's a risk that if you don't take, then other things which are worse may happen, like the exhibition not happening and then the Sao Paulo Biennial stopping. The team has a core which is Brazilian. It's Agnaldo Farias and Moazir dos Anjos, which are really interesting curators. One is from Recife and the other one is based in Sao Paulo. And then there is 4 international curators, Rina Carvajal, myself, Yuko Hasevaga, and Sarat Maharaj. So it's people from very, very different backgrounds and also with a very different conception of the art praxis, and also a very different understanding of the context of Brazil, which is very specific. And the Sao Paulo Biennial is one of the oldest biennials, not only in the continent, but all over. So it has been difficult in a good and productive way, I must say. But this difficulty is kind of necessary in teamwork because, you know, it's not about, and that's also one of the main conversations we got. At the beginning, everyone assumed that if you are having a team of curators, then there is sections, by definition, that you need to read who did what. So it's very funny that I propose people that I would not propose for MAGMA, and probably I would not work in the same manner when I was in the Kunstverein in Frankfurt. So it's kind of difficult to know who I did propose. There is also almost nobody with my same passport, because I don't think that when you are working in a team of curators, that you are there to represent any latitude, I think. And that's a step forward to this idea of curating and representing. And I think that what is important is the script or the ideas that you have been working with. In that sense, I agree with Jens. That's very important that you contribute with your thinking and your research, but in the case of the Sao Paulo Biennial, only after listening. I think we need to listen and to study what the Sao Paulo Biennial meant, what these two curators wanted to do, and then kind of inform or help them. It was really not a question of getting represented as a curator in such a thing. This is much more complicated than it sounds, but I think it's much more organic and more matching, let's say, the method of working that you would follow in science. It would be really stupid to represent yourself in an aspirin, so to say. This is kind of in a team of curators, it's kind of the same stupidity. It should not be so readable who did what, if you really create a team.
Any other questions? No? Okay, well, thank you very much. Oh, no, there's one more question. Last seconds.
I'm just curious about art parcours, since you just curated that. Could you just talk a little bit about that? About how you chose the work and what work you decided to put in?
Well, Art Parcours is a project that is running parallel to Art Basel. It's part of Art Basel, something that I organized here for these days during the fair. It's art in public space. There's 10 different artists that I invited to make site-specific works for the old town of Basel. And it's the idea of the parcours, where you go from one location to the other through obstacles and find these artworks. There are these maps that you can get at the exit that will point you into the direction of all these different pieces. And they're mostly site-specific. We have one in the Münster, in the cathedral here. It was done by Angela Bullock. There is a performance program going on one of the little ferries that's been done by German artist John Bock, who is going back and forth there. So if you don't have anything else to do tonight or tomorrow night, you should come by and have a look at the program. Well, thank you very much for coming. Oh, and issues are here for free. You can come and pick issues up if you like something to read. Thank you so much.